Every healthy system claims to reward improvement, work harder, get better, create more value. That's the promise. But what happens when improving your situation starts to feel risky? Not because you might fail, but because you might succeed. This is the moment most people don't expect. The moment when progress stops being encouraged and starts being quietly discouraged. Not with bans, not with rules, but with consequences. In theory, systems need progress to survive. They need people to grow skills, to build businesses, to innovate, to move forward. But in practice, not all progress is welcome. Some kinds of improvement create movement. Movement creates unpredictability, and unpredictability is dangerous. To systems built on stability, this is the paradox we're going to talk about today. Why some systems depend on growth, but fear the people who actually grow. Why becoming more productive doesn't always make life easier. Why getting better can increase pressure instead of reducing it, and why in certain environments the safest move is not to improve at all. In the last videos, we looked at what happens when people lose faith in good decisions, when exits disappear, when survival becomes the goal. This video is about what comes after that, what happens when even progress starts to feel dangerous. Because once a system reaches that point, it stops asking, how do we grow? It starts asking something else. How do we keep things from changing? And that question changes everything. Progress creates movement, and movement is the one thing rigid systems struggle to handle. When people improve quickly, they change position. They earn more, they gain leverage, they gain options, and options are disruptive. Stable systems rely on predictability. They need to know where people will live, how long they'll stay, what level of income they'll accept, what risks they're willing to take. Predictability allows planning, but progress breaks that. A person who improves becomes harder to forecast. They move cities, they renegotiate terms, they switch careers, they leave arrangements. That no longer makes sense. From the individual perspective, that's success. From the system's perspective, that's volatility. This is why not all growth is treated equally. Systems are comfortable with growth. That stays within bounds. More hours worked, without more bargaining power, more productivity, without more autonomy, more output, without more exit options. That kind of progress feeds the system without threatening it. But growth that increases independence is different. It reduces reliance, it increases choice, and that kind of progress creates problems. Think about how incentives shift. If improving your skills allows you to leave an expensive city, housing demand weakens. If higher productivity lets you reduce working hours, labor leverage shifts. If building something new creates alternatives, existing structures lose control. So the system responds, not by stopping progress outright, but by reshaping its rewards. Improvement becomes expensive. You earn more, but costs rise alongside you. You become more productive, but expectations rise faster. You gain skills, but credential requirements inflate. So even as you move forward, your relative position stays the same. You're running faster, just to stand still. From the outside, this looks fair. Everyone's dealing with higher costs. Everyone has to keep up. That's just how modern economies work. But the effect is precise. Progress no longer creates freedom. It creates pressure. And once people notice that pattern, their behavior changes. They stop asking, how can I get better? They start asking, is it worth it? Not morally, structurally. Is the effort protected? Is the upside durable? Does improvement actually change my options? When the answer keeps being no, people adapt. They cap their ambition. They avoid standing out. They stop accelerating, not because they lack ability, but because acceleration now attracts penalty. This is the moment. Progress turns dangerous, not because it's forbidden, but because it's unprotected. And systems that reach this stage don't need to suppress improvement. People do it themselves. When people hear the word punishment, they imagine enforcement, rules, penalties, or restrictions. But modern systems rarely punish progress directly. They don't say, "You're not allowed to improve." They say something else. "Of course you can improve, just to understand the consequences." And that's where the pressure lives. The first mechanism is cost escalation. As people improve, the price of maintaining that improvement rises. You earn more, housing costs adjust upward, you gain stability, expectations increase, you move ahead. The baseline shifts, so progress doesn't create space, it tightens it. You're not punished for improving. You're punished for staying improved. The second mechanism is risk asymmetry. Upside becomes fragile, downside becomes permanent. If improvement works, you gain marginal comfort. If it fails, you lose everything you built. This makes risk-taking irrational, not because people fear effort, but because failure is no longer recoverable. A system that wants compliance doesn't need to block ambition. It only needs to make ambition dangerous. The third mechanism is moral reframing. Progress gets relabeled. Leaving becomes selfish. Advancing too quickly becomes irresponsible. Escaping bad arrangements becomes disloyal. None of this is enforced by law. It's enforced socially. People start internalizing the message. That wanting more creates instability, and instability becomes the ultimate sin. The fourth mechanism is exposure without protection. People who improve become visible. They earn more. They move differently. They step outside the median. But the system does not protect them from new risks. Taxes rise, costs rise, scrutiny increases, support does not. So improvement feels like stepping into a spotlight with no safety net. Over time, people learn the pattern. Improving doesn't make life easier. It makes life more precarious. You have more to lose, more to manage, more to defend. And critically, no proportional increase in freedom. This is why progress slows before it stops. People don't quit improving overnight. They plateau, they cap their ambition just below the danger zone. They aim for comfortable enough, stable enough, not worth risking. This is not stagnation by force, it's stagnation by design. And once enough people behave this way, the system stabilizes. Not because it's healthy, but because progress has been quietly neutralized. The system still talks about growth, still celebrates success stories, still praises improvement. But the underlying message is clear: improve, as long as you don't change anything. Once progress becomes costly, something counterintuitive happens. People don't rebel against the system. They protect it, not because it works well, but because acknowledging the problem would force them to confront what their sacrifices failed to deliver. When people invest years playing by the rules, studying, working, delaying life, accepting less than promised, they build an identity around endurance. Admitting that progress is punished doesn't just criticize the system, it questions the meaning of their own choices, so the mind adapts. Instead of asking, "Why does improvement make things harder?" people ask, "Why are others trying to change things?" Instead of seeing progress as necessary, they start seeing it as destabilizing. Risk-takers look irresponsible. People who move fast look reckless. Those who leave look disloyal. Not because they are, but because they threaten. The emotional logic that made survival acceptable. This is how systems gain social armor. They don't just rely on policy, they rely on psychology. People begin to enforce limits on each other. They warn friends not to aim too high. They discourage younger people from expecting too much. They frame ambition as unrealistic, not out of malice, out of self-preservation. Once this mindset spreads, the system no longer needs to punish progress aggressively. Society does it automatically, through tone, through advice, through being realistic. Anyone who tries to grow too fast is treated as a problem to be managed, not an example to follow. This is why reform becomes so difficult at this stage. Change threatens stability, and stability, or even a shrinking one, feels safer than uncertainty. People who have learned that progress invites penalty will resist any proposal. That introduces movement. Even if movement is the only path to renewal, the system benefits from this hesitation, not because it's designed to, but because inertia is powerful. A society that learned to fear improvement will choose familiar stagnation over uncertain growth again and again. And this is the final irony. The more a system punishes progress, the more people cling to it. Not because it gives them a future, but because it gives them a sense of coherence, a story that explains why nothing improved. When progress becomes dangerous, systems don't stop functioning. They change objectives. They stop asking, how do we grow? They start asking, how do we manage what's left? This is the quiet pivot most people miss. A system that punishes improvement cannot expand opportunity, so it learns to manage decline instead. Not collapse, not crisis. Decline, slower growth, lower expectations, tighter margins. And because everything still works, this shift feels reasonable. In decline management mode, the goal is no longer progress. It's containment. Prevent instability, avoid shocks, smooth outcomes, protect existing structures, even if those structures no longer serve most people. This is where progress becomes truly dangerous, not because it fails, but because it exposes the truth that the system cannot reward improvement without destabilizing itself. And systems faced with that reality rarely choose reform. They choose control. They manage behavior. Instead of expanding opportunity, they encourage adaptation. Instead of transformation, they reward survival instead of ambition. And over time, people adjust their lives to match those incentives. This is how stagnation gets normalized. People stop asking why things don't improve. They start asking how to cope better, how to budget more carefully, and how to lower expectations, how to avoid risk. Life becomes optimization inside shrinking boundaries. And because this happens gradually, no single moment feels like failure. There's no dramatic breaking point, just a future that keeps getting postponed. This is the cost of systems that punish progress. They don't collapse spectacularly. They age, they preserve form, while losing vitality. They remain orderly, while quietly exhausting possibility. Progress was never dangerous by itself. It only became dangerous to systems that could no longer absorb it. And that's the final insight of this season. When improvement threatens stability, the problem is not ambition, it's structure. There is a reason. Managed decline feels familiar. Humans are extremely good at adapting to shrinking environments. We lower expectations, we recalibrate ambition. We learn to live with less space. At first, this looks like resilience, but resilience without renewal is just slow exhaustion. Over time, people stop noticing what's missing. They stop comparing life to what it could have been. They compare it only to what would feel worse. And that is how decline stabilizes. This is also why data alone rarely changes anything. You can show wage stagnation, you can show housing inflation, you can show productivity gaps. But as long as people are surviving, numbers feel abstract because the system still functions. The damage isn't loud enough to demand action, it's quiet enough to be tolerated. And this is where many societies get stuck. Not because solutions don't exist, but because solutions require movement. And movement reintroduces uncertainty. A system that has trained its people to fear uncertainty will always choose managed decline over risky renewal, even when renewal is the only path forward. This is why progress becomes dangerous, not to people, but to structures that can no longer absorb it. Structures built for preservation cannot handle expansion. They interpret growth as instability and instability as threat. Understanding this is not about despair, it's about diagnosis. Because once you see that decline is being managed rather than solved, you stop waiting for improvement to arrive on its own. You stop confusing endurance with health, and you stop organizing your life around promises that the system no longer keeps. If this season helped you understand why efforts stopped compounding, why exits disappeared, why survival replaced ambition, and why progress itself became risky. Subscribe, not for optimism, not for outrage, but for clarity. Because once you understand how systems manage decline, you can decide how much of your life you're willing to organize around them. In the next season, we'll look at what happens next, how systems maintain the appearance of reform without changing outcomes, how decline gets rebranded as stability, and how entire societies learn to live inside managed stagnation without calling it what it is.